past, you've cornered the market in Magnificent Bastard.
Yes, thank you.
With this, previously there's been sort of redeeming features, and this chap doesn't really have any, does he?
He doesn't, but I think you're going to like him. I think that's what happens with the show. I think you, despite yourself, you sort of... the people I've spoken to who've watched the first 4 episodes, they sort of end up liking the killers in a weird way. He's got a very fine line in wit, you know, he's got an elegant turn of phrase, and he's enjoying himself. And I think even if you're playing a serial killer, if he's enjoying himself, the audience kind of enjoy themselves when they're, you know, vicariously sort of through him in a way, you know. And I think that's a big part of playing a bad guy like this, is if you look, if the character's enjoying themselves, and the audience kind of, despite themselves, they can't help it.
Because there is, I mean, unlike something like Dexter where the killer's the focus, or your standard drama where the cop is the focus, it is much more of a two-hander between you and Kevin, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. It's very much so, and you know, I mean, you're absolutely right. There is nothing much to say that's good about Joe Carroll, you know, and at least with you know, with Dexter, he's at least performing some kind of community service. Whereas, you know, Joe Carroll, I mean, that's the big risk that we're taking, is, you know, he's a man who kills innocent people. And he's clearly batshit crazy in the sense that, you know, he looks like the sanest man on the planet, but it's what goes on in his spare time that's so terrifying. But, hey, you know, Ted Bundy was exactly the same. You can imagine having a really good pint of beer with Ted Bundy when he's not doing his hobby.
And a good conversation about Poe.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, no, it's no, that's the other thing, is that when I was doing the research, one of the things I discovered about serial killers is some of them, they build a kind of alternate reality around themselves that makes all their hideous and appalling acts that they commit sort of justifiable to themselves in some way. Bundy famously, in his last interview before he was executed, blamed porn. And let's not forget, we're talking about 70s porn here. If everybody who watched 70s porn ended up a serial killer, Ted, then, you know, really the world would be a really appalling place to live in. So, you know, he built that thing around him for that, and Joe Carroll built this alternate reality around himself, that he's killing in the name of art and beauty, and there's nothing more beautiful than a dying woman, and so he kind of feels he is doing a community service in a strange way.
When you're acting in something like this, that is a long-running, potentially long-running show, obviously the writers have developed the character initially and developed the scripts, but do you then get input into how the character changes throughout the course?
No, not really, if I'm being honest. I guess what happens is that perhaps they see stuff that you do, and yes, you can give them the backstory that you've invented, and they may cherry pick little bits and pieces. They may not buy it wholesale, but they'll, you know, that kind of thing can happen, certainly can happen. Certainly when we were doing Rome, you know, you would find out great little nuggets about Mark Antony. You know, when I found out that Mark Antony used to drive around Rome in a chariot pulled by 6 lions, we put that into the show. But you know, you could go to the writer, and you can go to the Kevin, and you can suggest stuff. Whether he'll listen to you or not is an entirely different matter, but they may do, they may not.
It's interesting you bring up Rome, because that was, I think for a lot of British audiences, that was the point where you were reintroduced as a sort of...
Yeah, a different kind of thing, a different kind of man, as opposed to a boy.
Do you miss it at all?
Kevin McKidd and I were having lunch the other day in New York, and he said, you know, if we'd still been doing that show, we'd only have finished it this year. And it's absolutely true. If it had run the course that it should, I miss it in the sense that it was a great job. We lived in Rome. And, you know, it was a great bunch of characters, and it was a great character I was playing. So, yes, but, you know, you move on. There are other characters. I've played some great characters since then, so I'm not complaining.
Has anyone tapped you up for Game of Thrones yet? Because it does seem to be almost...
We won't do Game of Thrones.
Pardon?
No, we won't do Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones stole our show. If Rome had carried on, there would have been no Game of Thrones. So no, we won't be doing Game of Thrones. We're too bitter. Kevin and I decided that just the other day. Too bitter.
That's brilliant. It's terrible. It is true.
They stole our show.
It has been the replacement.
Yes,
for,
absolutely. A lot of the production people, they all went straight from Rome onto that. They just stole our show. So no, we shan't be doing that. We won't be working together.
That's a shame. So what is there in the future then? I mean, obviously there's this potentially for the foreseeable future, but does that mean you will be out of movies now?
No, the great thing about this show is we guaranteed only 15 episodes a year. So, in terms of a job that, for actors, that's just great because it means you only shoot for 6-7 months of the year. So it's 7 months total, and gives you 5 months of the year to do something else and have a holiday. It's not like doing, poor Kevin McKeardy's on Grey's Anatomy. They do 22 episodes a year. That's 10 months of the year.
And just to wrap up before we go, if, as you play a man with a cult following, it's a cult show, if you were to have your own little band of followers, what would you do with them?
Oh, world peace, cure poverty, all that kind of stuff. That's, I'm benign like that. Those are the kind of things that occupy my mind on a day-to-day basis are, the things to try and make the world a better place. I mean, without being too earnest. But yes, I would, those are the things I would try and do.
So definitely not protest.
Disband all organised religions, obviously. I'd kick off with that. Yeah.
So not protest outside the set of Game of Thrones for...
and protest outside. Yes, very good. Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.